What's up everybody, how's it going? It's Burke, aka Dansway here, and welcome to a new challenge mini-series on the channel. We had a truly incredible time with Final Fantasy X Auto Battle / Attack Only Challenge, and once I came to the end of it, of course, I was already thinking ahead to what shall I do next. That series helped to reignite some of that old school Dansgo 8 Final Fantasy challenge kind of flame, and I definitely wanted to continue down that lane because it was a lot of fun. Really sort of rolled back the years for me and for the channel, and obviously you guys took a massive interest in it, so thank you all so much for the love on the Final Fantasy X series that I did. Now let's get down to business and talk about this particular series of videos. Now I had two options once I reached the end of Final Fantasy X. Either I just do some other different kind of challenge for a different Final Fantasy game, because as always, I protect myself from burnout from my favorite game of all time by not just constantly rinsing it and starting a new playthrough as soon as I finish another one. So I definitely want to do another Final Fantasy, a different one, but I wanted to think about whether I should do a different kind of challenge, something that I've not seen done before, or something I have seen but that generally interests me. Or should I continue down the same vein and see how this attack-only situation works for a different Final Fantasy? And I decided to go with the latter, because for me, I found the whole concept very interesting, because something I've always heard talked about a lot in Final Fantasy games. In general, some are definitely more a victim of this than others, but you always hear a bit of a, oh, you just spam attack to win. And it's something that you almost can't escape in these games, because there's pretty much always an element of that in every single Final Fantasy game. If you're strong enough, usually just spamming attack gets you through most of the game. And so for me, it spurred a curiosity of, well, how applicable is this to the other Final Fantasy games in the series? And so I wanted to investigate and see how possible it was to try to get through my second favorite Final Fantasy game, Final Fantasy VII, by just using attack only. And so I decided to follow along in the same vein because I thought it would help me kind of find a comparison point between the two games on this front. Does the mechanics and the systems of one game make it pretty much impossible to win this way versus the other one? Is it going to be easier to do than Final Fantasy X? Is it going to be harder? All I knew was that this is what I wanted to investigate, and so I fired up Final Fantasy VII and I decided to give it a go and see if I could beat the entire game by just using attack only. Now, the support that I got for the Final Fantasy X one was absolutely insane. I'm not expecting every single series to be the same. That's the life of a YouTuber. Not every series performs the same. Not every series is received the same. You don't enjoy every single series the same amount. All of those things are true. With all that said, for anyone that's watching this one, and especially if you've come from the Final Fantasy X series as well, please do remember to drop a like on this video, especially on part 1, to really help it get going. And for everybody that supported the channel and the Final Fantasy X series on Patreon, a massive shout out to you guys. You were immense, and it's going to be a similar kind of format on this series as well. Now, this series is going to be shorter than Final Fantasy X, not necessarily because I didn't get very far. I have recorded everything in advance. I'm preferring to work this way right now because it makes the post-production side a bit easier for me, and it helps me schedule things out a lot more easily. I am going to try to condense it down more. There's going to be more extended sections where I'm skipping through things and generally tightening everything up. The Auto Battle series worked great for Final Fantasy X, and it was 16 episodes in total, including the bonus, but I think that was already like the absolute limit, and because it was Final Fantasy X and it was the first series of its kind, I think it just about was okay to make a series that long for it. But for this one, I'm definitely going to make it tighter. I'm not going to turn the entire run into one video. I've not liked doing that. I much prefer doing it this way because I can go a lot more in-depth. I can give you guys something to look forward to every couple of weeks, and I do generally like the format. I can put more effort into the individual episodes, and well, based on the feedback from Final Fantasy X, it worked out really well. So that's how we're going to be doing it, but expect less episodes than we had for Final Fantasy X. It's going to be a bit more tightly edited than that one. So those of you guys that know the game well will immediately say, hold on, there's quite a big problem here. And it's a problem that I didn't really realize. And another reason I wanted to do this challenge in the first place is because I wanted to try a challenge like this with a game that I don't know so well. 10 I know like the back of my hand, but 7 I've barely done any playthroughs of it, and especially nothing that's anything like a challenge run. And so having me try to tackle a game like this with relatively low experience and generally a very limited knowledge of the mechanics of the game would also make it a lot more interesting. And this became evident very early on, because I started the game, I fired things up, and I was thinking, yeah, this challenge is going to work out really nicely. And then I hit a problem pretty much immediately. So already I'm going to start to skip through some of the earliest encounters and show it in the background. But I hit a pretty quick problem when I realized that we have the limit gauge. Now, of course, I already knew we had a limit gauge in the game, but I kind of forgot that when the limit gauge was full, you are forced to use a limit break. You can no longer use your normal attack. The game forces you to use your limit break, and that obviously kind of destroys the whole point of the challenge, because you can exploit those things and abuse it a lot more. So it doesn't become an attack-only challenge, and it kind of killed the whole thing. So I was like, oh shit, like this is a non-starter because you have the limit gauge. And so I ran into a brick wall pretty early on, and it was looking like I might even have to just try a different game. Now, thankfully, a hero came along to save the day, and it is none other than Death, aka 48 Productions on YouTube. He is a true Final Fantasy VII OG and creates some of the best content ever made on YouTube for that game. And I had the privilege of getting to know him and become friends with him through the podcast we did a few years back. And so we keep in touch. And I hit him up. I was like, dude, I'm having this problem. I want to do a challenge like this. Do you have any sort of help or advice that you can give for me to sort of circumvent this issue and continue with this challenge? And thankfully, he pulled through in a major way, where he took a save file that's from the absolute beginning of the game, and he basically disabled the limit bars for all of the characters. So this would mean that you can do the entire game with this modded save by just using attack only, because the limit bar doesn't charge up at all, and so it won't basically take over the attack command when it fills up. And so this was what I needed to actually start the challenge. So a huge shout out to 48 Productions. If you guys are fans of Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy in general, you should 100% be following him on YouTube. He creates amazing content and has a great community, and he's always been very helpful and generally a great ambassador for Final Fantasy. So that's my shout out to 48. Thank you again for helping me with that. And thanks to that, I was able to set on the journey and begin the task of trying to complete Final Fantasy VII by using attack only. So let's see how I would get on. As mentioned, one of the reasons I was so interested in this was because of the difference in mechanics, of course, between different Final Fantasy games and how this would affect the challenge. Now, this game already is very different from Final Fantasy X because you have the whole order system. You can put people on the front row or the back row. And so within a few battles, thankfully, I remembered to put Barrett to the back row because he has a long range weapon, and when you're on the back row you take less damage. And so this was going to be something that was going to be a staple of the challenge, and it would affect various decisions as I got through the game. But putting Barrett in the back row early on definitely helped make him tankier and more likely to survive in the future. So that was one of the first things I did to make sure I was kind of optimizing as much as I could. And then I encountered my first boss of the game, which was of course the guard scorpion inside the reactor. Now, this one, thankfully, wasn't too much of a problem because we have like an active battle system here. What you can also do in this run is basically nothing at all. So you're not committing to using an action. The only problem with this guy is when it puts his tail up, if you attack it, it's going to counter-attack and it's going to do a lot of damage. Now, obviously, in an attack-only challenge, you can either do nothing or you can attack. And so for this one, all I had to do was attack, but when it put its tail up, I just let the sort of timer continue to run, and I did nothing. I just stood there, I didn't defend, I didn't change rows, I didn't use anything else, I just waited. And thanks to being able to do that, I was able to overcome this battle relatively easily. I think if it was going to hit me with those counterattacks, so basically, if the restriction was that every single time the ATB fills, you're not allowed to delay at all, and you have to attack, then with those counterattacks, there's a chance I wouldn't have made it, and I would have had to do a bit of early grinding. But thankfully, I didn't have to do anything like that, and we overcame the battle on the first attempt. Now, in general, I will keep the same thing that I did for Final Fantasy X, where I will only grind for stats when I feel that it's necessary, because of course, one way to approach this type of challenge is always basically whatever area you're in, just grind as much as you can. However much time you're willing to invest, basically just get everyone up to as high a level as you can and then just completely blitz through the game. But my goal was always to try my best to just keep going, keep the momentum up, and if I hit a brick wall where my stats weren't high enough or I was missing something, then I would take some time out to farm something, try to get something I don't already have, try to increase my levels, and all of that kind of stuff. But thankfully, at least early on, it wasn't necessary, and without too much difficulty, I was able to take down Guard Scorpion and continue the journey. Once that happened, we had to escape from the reactor, and historically, I always knew that there was plenty of time for this, and I thought if anything, it might be an excuse to just get a few extra battles in. So I tried to not rush things too much. From the random encounters I'd already had, it was pretty clear that I was strong enough to handle everything here just with attack only. So in general, Cloud and Barret were more than a match for everything that we faced here. And honestly, when I was running low, because they do drop potions now and then, I was able to heal. So while I'm here, a quick word on what I'm going to do with like healing items, materia, and all of that kind of stuff moving forward. Now, I did discuss this with 4.8, and it was like, is this possible without any materia? And honestly, maybe it is, but based on especially what he said as well, and I trust his opinion a lot on this because he's done endless challenges, it could end up being extremely grindy and potentially very, very boring if you try to do it with no materia. And well, it might just be downright impossible anyway. And you'll see later on how possible a no materia attack only run will be as you watch the video. So I let myself use materia, and when I was running low on HP, I did use items in the menu. So the same way that I did it for Final Fantasy X as well. Because if you take that away as well, like I say, things just get... I'm trying to find that sweet spot of keeping the run entertaining and not have it be literally the most hardcore challenge, and just keep things moving along as well. So the goal is always to not use anything other than the attack command when I'm in battle. But outside of it, like using items in the healing menu, that kind of thing, I didn't really mind that too much. So that's generally like the rule set that I had for myself in this particular run. So I ground the clock down, like I said, down to about 2.5 minutes or so. I didn't want to go like super close here. And then I got myself out of the reactor to safety so that I could continue the story. One thing also, again, not being experienced with the game that I didn't know, was sometimes the game will automatically heal the party. And obviously I didn't know at what stages this happened. So I tried to kind of be frugal with my item usage. And I did keep a lot of saves in case something like that happened, or a party member left the party and I forgot to unequip something, whatever it might be. So as always, a lot of save files during this run as well. So of course Cloud meets Aerith, and soon afterwards we are surrounded by all of the Shinra soldiers. And for this one again, I was just like, I might get overwhelmed. It was unlikely, I could probably survive, but I just took the option to run away and not engage. And so before long, Cloud did his fancy little jump onto the train, and we got ourselves out of that sticky situation. During this section, there was a lot of story, of course. You get to meet Tifa, add her to the party, spend some time in 7th Heaven, chat with Barret a lot, watch him get angry at things, etc. So once I got a chance to start buying things from shops, of course, as always, I tried to buy what I could. Early on, I would just focus a little bit more on my healing items and just making sure I had enough of that instead of spending money on any materia. And so I did pop into the train graveyard just to see how things were going. Once Tifa was added to the party as well, I had a little exploration in there just to see if I encountered anything. I wasn't sure if this would be like an early little farming spot for me. So first encounter that happened here, I was pretty sure again we'd be fine. Relatively weak stuff here. And you can see Tifa with a nice critical hit there. And another one. So it's all smooth sailing here, especially, I mean, there's like saves nearby, there's places to sleep and recover your health, all that kind of stuff. So once I established that I could get the job done here and that I wasn't in any real danger, I stuck around for a little bit. I think maybe I had like 10, 15 encounters, something like that. Basically I wanted Tifa to at least get up to level 8 before we continued. I wasn't really sure how difficult things were going to be in the battles to come, so I wanted to at least get one more level since she was 2 levels behind Barret and Cloud to start with. So I just hung around long enough for level 8 for Tifa, and then after that I was ready to move on. In general, as the game and story progressed, I did my best to try and get all of the items that I could. Once again, due to my very limited Final Fantasy VII knowledge, I did consult some guides sometimes to make sure I didn't miss any important items or materia that could be given. So like, for example, even on the train, speaking to this guy gets you a Phoenix down. Little things like that. I made sure, to the best of my ability, I tried to grab everything that I could. to help improve my chances of survival. So yeah, again, pretty story heavy section. I think we'll skip through a lot of this and head towards the next more significant battle in the run. And so before long, it was down into the next reactor. Once again, the random encounters here were looking pretty easy, and especially for like the early going, attack only was working pretty nicely. Comparing already to Final Fantasy X, I think Final Fantasy X had a higher reliance on magic early on. So if you remember right from VII, you already had to encounter the Flan, which pretty much like using normal attack, that's not how you were supposed to defeat it, and it was much more difficult. Now, with Final Fantasy VII so far, yes, you can use magic and it will help in some situations. But as you can see, even if you completely ignore magic for now and just attack everything, no matter what type of enemy it is, it seems to be working well so far. And so for an attack-only challenge, at this particular moment in the very early going, it's already easier than Final Fantasy X. But we'll just have to see if it remains that way. What kind of difficulty spikes are we going to get? And to what extent are we going to hit like brick walls that are going to force us to bend or even break the rules in order to proceed? So the early signs were definitely good, and we'll just have to see how long that lasts before we encounter something truly problematic. Now against these guys, we finally started to see a bit more in terms of status effects, and status effects were always going to be an interesting one for me, because obviously when you have to rely on attack only, sometimes you're going to be really in trouble. Let's say you have darkness afflicted, what's going to happen with that? That's of course literally to be able to attack, and then you have all of the other status effects that could really hinder your challenge. To what extent can you mitigate against those? What kind of equipments are we going to be able to get? What material combinations can we come up with to protect us against certain status effects? And of course, the flip side of that, which ones are we going to be able to afflict? And as we move on, obviously, if I pick up any equipment of interest that I end up using, or a material combination that I start to use, I'm going to share that with you guys too. But for now, of course, in the very early going, there was very little to do on this front. Now, one good thing is that you can see here Barrett gets poisoned in this particular encounter. Poison doesn't continue on until the next battle, so once the battle is over, at least you don't have to use an antidote or any kind of Isuna or anything like that to heal poison, which is nice. And also you can see that the effect it has is relatively minimal. I mean, it's taking 12 HP from Barrett, which is not much at all, and you can see like you can live with being poisoned in this challenge as long as it doesn't like end up being a super long battle. Poison doesn't seem to be too huge a deal, so that was also fine. Then came the biggest challenge of the game so far. Trying to do this for some reason was almost impossible for me. It literally took like an embarrassingly long amount of time. So yeah, the biggest challenge of attack only so far was trying to do this stupid timing thing with these guys. I don't remember how many times I needed in the commentary playthrough to do it, but I was absolutely hopeless in this particular run. So yeah, moving swiftly on. The next battle already was Airbuster, and I thought this one might be particularly interesting because you kind of get split up a little bit, and I wondered if it focuses on a particular character, could we be in trouble? And so I was looking forward to facing Airbuster. I felt like this might be a pretty early difficulty spike. So let's see what happened against Airbuster. This theme is always just so legendary as well. Always been a fan of it. So you get the side attack. Barrett gets to do more damage because he's attacking from behind here. But of course the counter attack comes in. 77 damage is not huge, but it's also far from insignificant. So I don't know, depending on Airbuster's HP and what happens here, maybe there's a chance that we get KO'd. So let's see. But thanks to this side attack, we're definitely doing a lot more damage than we normally would. I think if all three of us were facing him normally, we might be in more significant trouble here. So Big Bomber comes in and does 99 damage. So you can see, I mean, Cloud already down to about half HP here, and it's still going. So might be a little bit tight. Turn function non-operational. Now let's see how the rear gun does. Rear gun does a lot less, so that's good. And I think at this stage it was starting to feel like I should have a decent chance of taking it out. As long as it spreads its attacks out. Which it was doing, to be fair. So you can see it's starting to get a little bit tight, but Tifa still has a lot of HP, and Barrett and Cloud can survive at least 2 or 3 more moves. And there you go. So we managed to take it out. Nothing too dramatic here. You can see my levels are pretty much what they would generally be at this stage of the game as well. So attack only, still working pretty nicely so far. Now, of course, it's time for the Cloud and Aerith section of Midgar. This was somewhere where I started to get a bit more concerned for obvious reasons. We're down to 2 party members, and one of those party members is far from a physical attack specialist. So what was going to happen in this situation? Are we going to encounter something that the game really demands that you use Aerith's magic for, but you keep spamming attack, and so you're going to be in big trouble? I wasn't too sure. So this was the first time I started to get a little bit more concerned about whether we were going to start to struggle here. So let's begin the Cloud and Aerith section and see how that went. It doesn't take long for the action to start with Cloud and Aerith, as we have to make this escape from the church. And let's see that first encounter. So 3 on 2 here, but only did 4 damage. Obviously the game is going to kind of scale things down a little bit to make sure that having 2 party members doesn't cause you a huge amount of problems. Spell coming in, 27 damage, not too much of a problem either. So I think, at least against these types of random encounters, I think we were going to be fine. Especially with our potions and our ability to heal if we really needed it as well. So then we had the section with the barrels, and normally, especially if you push the right barrels, it's not so much of a problem here. But at one point I did push the wrong barrel, and as a result, this happened. Aerith got into a fight that I didn't want her to get into, and so now I was like, shit. What is she going to do here? Thankfully, you can see, I mean, these guys, they're literally doing 2 damage to her, and so the odds of you dying in this battle, despite Aerith's very limited attack capability, seems very low. So yeah, initially I was worried as soon as I got the wrong barrel. I thought, oh no, like I've screwed myself over here. But the game seems to be very forgiving in this regard. And I think, again, overall, I would say it continues to be easier than Final Fantasy X for sure when it comes to attack only. So it is going to take a while. I'll speed things up, but Aerith does manage to take out these 2, of course. And with that, I was able to continue my escape and make it out okay, despite messing up with one of the barrels. At this stage, I decided to buy a second restore materia. Basically, I knew I was gonna start using materia properly at some point to help me heal, to help me defend against status effects, to help me afflict status effects. So I tried to make sure I had multiples of whatever I could in order to help the party and increase my chances. So once again, let's keep going until the next relatively significant boss battle of the run. Now before that, once we make it to Aerith's house, we actually get the cover materia. And the cover materia, again, at this stage I'd committed to using materia in this run, because even though things felt easy now, the point was to try to get to the end of the game. I didn't want to just make it like 8 hours in and then die because I couldn't use materia, or, you know, try to transform the challenge too much midway through, because materia is such a big fundamental thing that completely changes how you play. I didn't want to try to combine those 2 things together. So at this stage I did fully commit to the materia, and cover I felt was a good one, especially for somebody on the back row. So someone on the back row who's tanky and has the cover materia, in general I felt like that would be a good idea. And so then began Cloud's little attempt to escape towards Wall Market. And Aerith is of course there too, and this was the section where I thought we might be in a little bit of trouble, because I remember a certain enemy here that could cause a lot of problems. So let's see how that particular battle went. Of course, people who know the game well will know exactly what I'm talking about. It was not this particular encounter. But even from 7 Remake, I remember the Hell House boss battle being really interesting and like pretty horrible. But it was one of the best boss battles of that entire game, I will say that. But in this particular game, compared to the relative HP level and the strength level of what you fight in here, the Hell House is quite brutal. And so you can see 66 damage there on a back attack against Aerith. Things were looking like they might get a bit dangerous against something like the Hell House. So this was a section where I was much more on alert and hoping that Hell House would be something I could defeat. Otherwise, I was perhaps going to have to rely on like RNG to skip through this bit without encountering any. So we'll see. Here we go, the Hell House encounter. Again, I didn't remember how much HP it had, only that it had quite a lot, and it was quite hard to damage, and that it did that whole thing where it transformed into like the hellish form. I thought this thing might be trouble. So let's see how it goes here. I keep Aerith back row because I'm like, she can't do much damage anyway. At least she can prove as a bit of a better decoy and survive for longer on the back row. So that was my general thinking for that. So there it is, suicide drop. Thankfully the damage numbers, as you can see, are pretty low. But once it starts doing that, the damage numbers go up quite significantly. So I had to make sure I finished it off relatively soon. Otherwise I was going to start to see some KOs. So still hanging in there, but definitely for a random encounter here, it's pretty beefy. But thankfully, we managed to get it done. So if even Hell House was something we could deal with Cloud and Aerith, then I was pretty confident that we'd be fine up until whatever the next boss battle was. So once again, I will move ahead a little bit. Of course, I will show you guys the squat race, just to show you how I did here. I was not particularly great at squatting in the remake, but for this one I actually did pretty well, if I remember correctly. So I'm watching back my recording right now as I voiceover. I'm pretty sure I won this. Yes, okay, I did win it. So there you go. Just so you know, it wasn't necessary, but I did win the squat off against this guy, and I got the blonde wig. So yeah, what you do against Don Corneo, I don't think is that important here. I just wanted to make sure I made the progress I wanted to make, and just generally pick up items and stuff along the way. So yeah, gonna skip through most of this because it's a lot of stuff that's not relevant to the actual run. If you do want to watch all of this, if watching this so far has made you nostalgic for the OG 7 story, of course I have my playthrough of the game, which I enjoyed immensely, and that was viewed by quite a lot of you guys, so thank you for that. But yeah, if you do want to experience that version of things as well, then of course you're more than welcome to check out my playthrough as well on the channel from 2018/19. It was a really good time. So yeah, for this one I am going to continue to skip through a lot of this great stuff, but if you want to see that, you know where to go. Now the next party that you form is going to be Cloud, Tifa and Aerith, and the next boss battle we're going to have is going to be Abzu. Again, I wasn't sure here because in my mind, Final Fantasy VII Remake is a bit fresher, and for the remake, at least for the first game in the remake, Abzu comes relatively late, like not super late, but later in the game, of course, than it does for the OG. And so I remembered Abzu being quite hard, and so in my head I was like, is he that hard in OG 7 as well? Like, should I be worried about this battle? But we're going to see very soon how the party did against Abzu. So far, it's been relatively smooth sailing, and nothing has caused any particular problems yet, and we haven't been KO'd at all at this point either. So we'll see how long that lasts. So after chopping, ripping and smashing Don Corneo's thing, we fall through the trapdoor and end up in the sewers. Before Abzu, we got a random encounter. It was a nice way to just have a little test of where we were at in terms of our stats. Especially with Tifa back as well. It's far from the ideal party, but I figured this team should surely be enough. But you can already see, I mean, that guy withstood quite a few attacks there. So, especially when it's 3-on-3, it was going to take a little while to kill these guys. I think it took like 4 hits or something, so that's still quite a lot. But thankfully, I think the saving grace so far in this challenge is how little damage the enemies do. Like, enemies taking 3 to 4 hits to kill doesn't make them very easy. Like, it's far from a one-hit KO, obviously, but the fact that they're only doing like single-digit damage a lot of the time at this point is what's keeping this challenge being easy at this particular point. Like, if they were doing like 30s, 40s, and 50s, then I think things would be a lot more interesting, but surprisingly so, I think they're just really not doing a lot of damage. And playing through so far, I was pretty surprised at how little the damage was from these random encounters at this point. Like 3 damage. I know she's back row, but in my mind I was just like, come on man, 3 damage. But that's how it goes. And so this kept the random encounters easy, and it allowed us to continue to make progress pretty rapidly at this stage. And so it was finally time for the boss battle against Apps, also known as Abzu. This was actually an important boss battle because first of all, it's the first one basically that can do any kind of big attack that hits the entire party. And you saw that there. Thankfully the damage wasn't too huge, but it was something I was definitely worried about because obviously if it spammed it a bit too much, it could be a problem. Now this guy has 1800 HP, which is quite a lot relative to the damage output that we are doing here. So you can see Tifa and Cloud doing about 100 together, and then Aerith coming in with like a 15 or so. Now, this attack in particular, this lick attack, is very significant because it was one of the absolute keys to this challenge. Now, for someone with relatively limited knowledge of Final Fantasy VII, I of course tried to do a little bit of research to make sure I got up to speed on like status elements, buffs, and all of that kind of stuff. Now, I'll explain sadness a bit later for anyone who doesn't know. For now, I'll concentrate on the battle because it's going quite thick and fast here. But we had some interesting RNG with Abzu choosing to fight against Aerith quite a lot here, just attacking her all the time. Now, I did look this up to see if this was like, you know, it's coded to attack the person with the lowest HP or something. It doesn't seem to be. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I did look it up. But for some reason, it's just obsessed with attacking Aerith. So thankfully, I guess Aerith in that sense is doing her job because she's the one that's going to deal the least amount of damage. So I'm kind of happy for her to take hits that would normally be depleting Cloud or Tifa's HP. So those two guys are continuing to work on it while Aerith becomes basically the tank in this battle. Now, Suwa Tsunami you saw was about 50 damage, but Abzu damages itself when using it too for quite a significant amount here, 189. And so it was looking like we should be able to get this done, provided that it didn't pull out any other unexpected moves, because obviously I didn't know the entire moveset or anything, but at this stage I was pretty sure that this was all it did. So another one coming up, and this is already basically almost 600 damage against itself of the 1800, so okay, only did 45 this time, damn. But whatever the case may be, we got it done. We got our first KO because Aerith got picked on so heavily there. Basically every single attack, other than that one lick, hit Aerith, which was really weird. But she got taken out as a result, but we got through the battle okay. So now, it's time to talk about the lick attack and the sadness status effect. You can see Cloud has it there. And this was really lucky RNG because this is the first time in the game I believe that you can be afflicted with sadness. And so the fact that my main damage dealer got hit with it was really awesome. So let me just quickly explain what sadness is for anyone who doesn't know, because I'm sure there's plenty of people that are just like me, just like casual fans of the game, just enjoying having a Final Fantasy VII experience. So let's have a look at sadness and what specifically it does. Sadness is a status that causes the character to take 30% less damage from physical and magical attacks, but also halves the rate the limit gauge fills. Now for us this is absolutely great because the limit gauge we have nothing to do with anyway, because we're not going to be able to use limit breaks, and we get a free 30% damage reduction. So for someone on the front row, they're basically, it's almost like they're kind of semi back row as a result. So if you're back row and have sadness, you are reducing a very significant chunk of damage. And so once I saw that Cloud got sadness, I was like, this is great. If I get a game over relatively soon, this is a save that I need to continue from. And moving forward with the game, basically sadness is a status that you want on your characters all the time. And thankfully, you'll be able to buy tranquilizers, which you can use just like a regular item. And you can afflict yourself with sadness when you use a tranquilizer. And so that was perfect, and it ended up being one of the absolute keys to this challenge. So yes, Cloud having sadness was great. Now, once again, there are times in the game when status effects get wiped, but as long as you've got tranquilizers in your inventory, you should be able to reapply it and basically spend as much of the game as possible in sadness status. So shout out to Abzu for giving me the status in the first place and for opening that opportunity for the rest of the game. So a really interesting status that generally should be a negative one, but that turns into a positive for this particular challenge. So that was great. And so with that, we made it to the train graveyard, and in this one there was some slightly interesting battles. Once again, nothing too difficult. The random encounters continue to be relatively easy, but these ghostly ones, they can disappear and become untargetable. And so that was something that I had to kind of learn to deal with. And for a second I was worried again. I thought, shit, like, is this something where it's going to force you to do something different and you can't simply use attack? I wasn't sure. But again, you can see things are taking about 3 hits with this particular party to kill. So we're far from like completely being OP and just blitzing everything out here. And so in that sense, I was quite happy that we were able to get through without having to do any kind of significant farming or leveling thus far. So now you can see the ghost has disappeared and our attack has missed. So at this stage I was like, is it going to keep doing that until I use a spell? Thankfully it doesn't work like that. It kind of disappears and then reappears. It lets you get a hit in and then it disappears again. So you kind of, it basically wastes your time a little bit, but it doesn't really put you in any danger or cause any legitimate problems. So thankfully the train graveyard in that sense was okay as well, because despite these guys and their little disappearing trick, we were still able to take them out and get through. So yeah, sometimes I had to wait, as you saw there. I just literally had to sit and wait until they reappear. But it wasn't any kind of situation where I had to basically come up with something different or not be able to attack them at all for the battle. So it worked out okay. We got through, and that was basically most of what I had to do in the train graveyard. And so with that, it was already time to go to the Shinra Building. So in this first episode, I will be getting towards the end of the Midgar section. I'm trying to include a lot of things per episode here, and it will be longer than what we'll usually be doing. But I think for this first episode, obviously, I want to make things quite full and entertaining as much as I can. And so you'll be seeing most of Midgar in this particular episode. So for this bit, you go down to only having Cloud and Tifa for a little while. And we had these flyboys, which I've always hated. They're just annoying little shits. And I figured it might be a bit difficult. Again, they might be very evasive. And so up until this point, we haven't really encountered an enemy that we struggle to hit on a regular basis. And you saw those first two hits being a miss already had me a bit worried here. The propeller move, again, doesn't do too much damage. So thankfully that could be our saving grace here. And thankfully after a couple of hits, they also come down, which really helps. But the propeller guys I always found annoying anyway. I found them annoying in the remake. Like, they're well designed, don't get me wrong, but they're just kind of annoying. And in this run, they were no different. So they did take a little while to defeat, but thankfully, again, due to the really limited damage, there's pretty much no way that they're going to be able to kill you. I think the odds of you having unlucky enough RNG that you basically miss them so much that they kill you is close to zero. So yeah, propeller guys were slightly frustrating, but nothing too problematic here. So I'm going to skip ahead to the next major battle that we have. At this point I had some tranquilizers, and so I started to apply them. And so with that, we were able to basically afflict sadness whenever we wanted to, provided that we had the tranquilizers. Now comes a cool battle, which again I remembered from 2018, and I wasn't sure how it was going to work. We are facing off against Reno and his pyramid attack. So Cloud is now within the pyramid, and thankfully all you have to do is attack to break the pyramid. If it was some other mechanic where you had to do something else, like maybe you had to use a spell or use some kind of different move, or maybe you couldn't break the pyramid at all and it was just a race against time and he could pyramid all three of you somehow or something, then this battle again would have been a fail. But thankfully we broke the pyramid pretty instantly. And especially with our team afflicted with sadness as well, we're taking even less damage, and we're just unleashing here. Thankfully, when you break the pyramid, you also don't damage your allies, you just damage the pyramid itself. That might have also kind of mixed things up a little bit, but not taking any damage definitely does help you as well. Especially when it's 3-on-1, generally the speed that you have, the amount of turns that you have, makes it very favorable towards you. And I think this is another one of those bosses where I don't think it's specifically the game really wants or needs you to use magic. And so just using attack only is not too much of a problem here. But it could have gone very wrong. If the mechanics for Pyramid were different, then this could have been a serious issue. But thankfully you can see again, relatively low damage output for Reno. And so it's only a matter of time before we take him down. There you go. He makes a swift retreat, and we can continue on our way. Obviously, going back through the same area that we already went through with Aerith, if Cloud and Aerith alone can deal with them, having Barret, Tifa, and Cloud makes it basically inevitable, a non-factor. So I am going to skip over a lot of this stuff, and we're going to move ahead again to the next kind of significant area / battles in the run. And so before long, this iconic shot happens, and it's time to make a choice. Do we go up the stairs or do we go through the main entrance? Now for me, to bypass a lot of potential battles, I chose to go up the stairs. I thought the less encounters I have here, the better. And so that's what I did. I just went straight through that way. Obviously, the climb was long, as it always is. But I thought, you know what, it's worth it. Let's just get straight up there. So yeah, we did the ladder climb with Barrett. It was funny as always. And with that, we were into the Shinra Building and could start having the battles there. And well, of course, you do get an elixir for your troubles that could get me out of jail in the future. Okay, so we find ourselves on the 59th floor. Of course, everybody has sadness. Level 12 to level 13 range. Tifa's caught up slightly to Barrett, which is nice. Big boy Barrett remains on the back row. He's still the only long range guy that we've got. But with everybody under sadness as well, especially Barrett with nearly 500 HP, back row plus sadness, I was feeling like I had a pretty decent chance of making this happen. So yeah, they do have these two forms here, but it only took 2 hits to bring them down into that form. But you can see the evasiveness here. Yeah, dodged 2 attacks in a row there. 3 attacks in a row. So evasion would be something that could definitely hinder this run quite significantly, depending on how often we encounter it and to what extent. Now, thankfully, you saw the 4th attack hit. So we're 1 for 5 at the moment, which is very low. And this did start to worry me, like only 1 out of 5, 2 out of 6. I figured, okay, you know, it's just about enough. If it was like a 10% chance to hit it all the time, then it might be a significant problem. But our accuracy was just about high enough to make enough hits to take these guys out. And it was the same with the propeller guys. Sometimes you would miss like 2 or 3 times in a row. But in general, you just about got enough hits in to not make it a significant issue. And I mean, Tifa's only lost 8 HP at this point. Barrett has like 85% of his HP. Cloud has almost 90% of his HP, so still not a threat, just something that takes a little bit of extra time potentially to kill. So again, I will be skipping some of these encounters where you've seen how they generally work. Now, we went to see Mayor Domino, and obviously because I have previous experience of the game, I already know how to figure out the puzzle and what it is, so I got it correct on the first try, and as a result, I got an elemental material, which is going to be quite important for obvious reasons. So of course, I can't use spells, but at least I can benefit from being able to do elemental damage against enemies which will have an elemental weakness. So especially in the Midgar area, you fight a lot of robots and mechs, and so having some kind of lightning plus elemental was definitely going to help me do more damage. And in an attack only challenge, that's what you need. And so getting the puzzle right on the first try was definitely something worth doing in this particular challenge, and I pretty immediately equipped the elemental materia with some lightning combination. Then I got all of the coupons and I exchanged them, and one of the first things you get is an item called 4 Slot, which, as the name suggests, has 4 slots for the armor. You get a star pendant which protects you against poison, which could be very useful, and you also get an all material, which once again very useful because it allows you to heal everybody at the same time if you want multiple characters to be able to have that. And so there were some nice goodies to be found in the Shinra Building for sure, and I made sure to get as many of them as I could. So at this stage I've got multiple characters that can heal the entire party outside of battle. I've got the sadness status, I've got elemental plus lightning, and I've got stuff like the star pendant to protect me from poison, which could prove valuable. So I was really starting to kind of get stronger and stack things up, and still, up until this point, I would say it's been a pretty easy run so far. As I continued further up, again, the random encounters at this stage, I was pretty OP for them. Like, there was nothing... I wasn't killing them in one hit, but in terms of the odds of me losing to any one of them, it was basically 0%. So in that context, I was definitely OP for them. They weren't very quick encounters, but still I was able to get through them very easily, and so that wasn't a problem. I was already looking ahead to the next boss battles to see if I could get through those with the same ease. Now, I will say, once I got to the 67th floor, I encountered these guys, and they actually had some pretty powerful moves. So, out of the Shinra soldiers, these guys were probably the toughest, and if we encounter like 4 of them or something, it could have been a problem. This flying sickle move is one of the strongest moves that, well, from a random encounter at least. And alongside that, they can also put you to sleep. So it's a pretty nasty little combination here, and up until this point, status effects hadn't really played much of a role. But against these guys at least, it did make things slightly more annoying. But once again, same story. I mean, their arsenal of moves is very nice. Over 100 damage done against the party. Pretty much the first time we've seen that in the game so far. And so it was pretty impressive. Thankfully, their HP isn't too huge and there was only 2 of them. If they had like 50% more HP and it was like 4 on 3, then things could have got pretty interesting. But thankfully, because we outnumber them, we managed to get the job done. But it's a little warning shot there of what status effects could do to you if you're unlucky or not very careful. Okay, so for the next battle, I knew what was coming, so I made a bit of preparation. I knew that there was going to be some poison status effect here. So I tried to see if maybe, even though elemental plus poison is more to do with the poison element than the status, I thought maybe I'd take less damage as a result of it or something like that. So I figured it might be worth just giving it a shot and seeing if elemental plus poison defensively could help a little bit against that particular attack. So here we go. Red 13 has a nice beefy 580 HP, which is pretty nice. I immediately just ignore the minions and go straight for 512. But it comes in immediately with that Shady Breath attack, which is, yeah, 2 out of 3 of the characters getting poisoned this quickly is not too great. So the 3 characters, I think together, they hit for about 100 HP, I think. With 512 basically being back row, it's definitely not taking much damage at all. 1000 HP isn't all that much, but when you're back row, it basically acts more like 2000 HP, I would say. That was a complete mistake. Obviously I didn't want to attack red there. Cloud with the star pendant from before is not being poisoned, thankfully, and that's making a nice difference. But you can see, I mean, I'm taking damage pretty quickly, especially with the minions doing their magic damage as well. So I had to be pretty fast here, and hopefully I would win this kind of race against time with all of the poison and the damage that was stacking up over time. I gave Cloud the cover because, well, he's not going to be poisoned in this battle, so I felt like he had a bit more kind of scope to be able to defend. And that was a nice critical. But you can see what a difference it makes when that poison comes in early. It can definitely change the outcome a little bit more. But thankfully, the status still just doesn't take as much damage. And you can see, I think the elemental for Barrett doing a good job here. He's definitely taking less poison damage. So I'm pretty sure it halves the poison damage you would take. That's how it works. So it doesn't stop you getting poisoned, obviously, but the effects of it are muted even more, which was very helpful here. Because Red 13 ain't looking so good. Unfortunately, in his debut battle in this challenge, he's in trouble here. I wasn't sure, like, even looking ahead, he's probably the better preference to Tifa, but I don't think he was going to gain any experience in this one, unless we got lucky and finish it off right now, which we didn't. So Red 13 gets KO'd, he becomes our second KO in this challenge. But I was pretty sure I could get this done. I mean, it was looking pretty tight here, but I was thinking surely I must be getting relatively close to 1000 damage now. But yeah, definitely like not a pushover boss at all in this challenge. And there you go, okay. So yeah, 1 KO and both of my characters have less than half of their HP left, so certainly not a walk in the park, but we got the job done, we defeated 512, and we could continue on our journey. So you can already see the difference that the materia is starting to make here. If you tried to do this with completely no materia, it was already going to be much harder even at this stage. So I think the elemental plus poison did a good job, and even the cover materia coming in now and then as well. So yeah, that was that done. We freed Red 13 / Nanaki, and with that it was on to the next boss battle. So this area was going to be, because we split the party as well, there was going to be multiple boss battles, and that's something that I was a bit worried about, because I thought, what if we have a team that's really ill-equipped to take on a certain battle? So this should be fun for you guys. I thought this section didn't have any random encounters. I thought this particular room, and you can see I've run around a fair bit here and nothing's happened. I thought this was random encounter free. Turns out it wasn't, and remember these assholes from a little earlier? Yes, there's 2 of them plus this guy in front. Now you can see I forgot to heal, I forgot to revive Red, and I already knew what was going to happen here. This was not good. So yeah, they bust in with their big moves straight away. Absolutely no mercy here. And I basically had no chance. I knew that I was going to die here. So yeah, as easy as the challenge has been so far, you can't take liberties. You have to make sure your party's healed and ready for anything at all times. And so a lot of these challenges, they rely so much on preparation and generally maintaining concentration and focus here. Like this encounter right here would have caused us a little bit of trouble even at full strength, and trying to come in with the situation that I did, it was a death sentence. And so yes, they did kill me, and I got my first game over in this challenge as a result of being clumsy and not making sure I healed up immediately after a boss battle. So yeah, that's what this challenge can do to you. And there you go, that's my game over as well. So got to stay on your toes. Like that's definitely a game over I could and should have avoided, but it can and will happen. That's just the way these things go. So of course I fired up the save again, but that meant I had to beat 512 again. I did it the same way I did last time, and so I'll skip ahead, but yeah, I had to do it again as a result. I will say this time I got luckier, and everybody survived as a result. You can see the damage was kind of a bit more distributed. And so yeah, I did keep Nanaki alive, and he was able to get some experience as a result of this encounter. So that was good. And well, he dealt the final blow too. So slightly different outcome for that, and one that did benefit me a little bit. So that was a little bit of a consolation for getting the silly game over here. And so yes, this time I wisely healed up immediately after that boss battle, and I was ready to go. Then I had a chance to select the party once again. I decided to balance things out by swapping Red XIII and Aerith. I felt like Tifa and Red were a pretty strong combination, and even though Aerith's a weak physical attacker, I felt like Barret and Cloud would make up for that. So I did change up the teams a little bit for added safety. And so this time we got 3 of these guys. Let's see how this turned out. I'm going to kind of skip through to the end. But their regular attack only does 11 damage, but then Bolt 2 can do over 100. So you can see what a variety they have in their ability to deal damage. They've got something in like the 10 to 12 tier. They've got something in the 60s, and then they got something over 100 as well. So depending on which ones they use and how they're distributed, these guys are still a bit dangerous. So I'll take you through to the end of it, and you can see, I mean, almost halfway for Cloud and Barret, and Aerith only had 115 left. So as random encounters go, they were basically one of the strongest that we faced in the entire game so far. A little bit later on, you start to face off against a slightly different set of enemies, and once again you can see I've kind of changed my setup here. I've got Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith, and these guys were really annoying because they kept using that move which takes absolutely ages. Does quite significant damage, but for me it was more so the animation just takes so long. What I didn't do for this one, I generally try to avoid it, was to use something that speeds up the gameplay. I have heard it can cause like some bugs and some issues, and so where possible, unless I was deliberately trying to farm for something, I kept the game running in its general like normal speed and tried to not have it sped up. So it made the run longer as a result, and it made stuff with long animations more annoying, but in general it wasn't too big a problem. It had been a long time since I played Final Fantasy VII, so it was just generally nice to be back and enjoying the game in this unique way. But you can see things are starting to get more interesting. Like again, these guys as well. Aerith basically, does she survive here? She just about survives. So you're starting to see situations where even in random encounters you can get taken out, depending on the RNG. And so you have to stay on your toes a little bit more than you did a couple of hours ago. Now once again, I knew that there were some pretty big boss battles coming up, including the one that I had been fearing the most up until this stage. Rufus versus Cloud. And so I thought, if Cloud is not going to be strong enough to defeat Rufus by himself because his level's too low, using attack only, we're going to hit a bit of a wall. So I did take a little bit of extra time here, especially next to this save point, to have a few more battles, and I wanted to get Cloud up to level 15 before the Rufus battle. So I did hang around a little bit. I will skip through it in general, but I did do a few extra battles just to get Cloud a little bit higher. And so once again, you have to split the team and you have to make multiple parties, and Cloud is going to fight Rufus, and the rest of the party are going to fight 100 Gunner / Heli Gunner. As a result, I did give Barrett the elemental this time, so he's got lightning plus elemental on his weapon to hopefully do a bit of extra damage to the mechs, and the rest of them obviously I just gave whatever I could to keep them alive. I didn't have too much more relevant materia like in battle that could actually help me, so that was one of the main ones that I had. And at this stage I was running out of tranquilizers, so I only gave Barrett one for the back row, trying to keep him alive. So tranquilizers, again, I'd never really used them in this way before, so I had to, like, it was a lesson to make sure I absolutely farmed as many of them as I could whenever I came to a shop. And so, yeah, I mean, I didn't realize I would need as many as I did, but moving forward I had to make sure my tranquilizer supply was always solid, because they do get used up pretty quickly, and statuses get wiped quite frequently as well. So had to be careful, and this already put me at a bit of a disadvantage here, not having two other characters afflicted with sadness as well. So it was time for 100 Gunner. I always thought this was a really cool like battle setup here. Let's see the kind of damage we're doing and how things are working out against this guy. I was really having to rely on Barrett here, being the defensive powerhouse that he was, and having the elemental. So 106 damage. Honestly, it was a little bit disappointing. I had hoped for more here, but it is what it is, and we're trying to do as much damage as we can. So this guy has 1,600 of HP. So that meant we were going to have to do quite a lot of work to defeat it. And well, of course, we had Heli Gunner to come pretty much immediately after it. So only Barrett can do damage, and we need to do 1,600. So it was going to be quite tight, and we had to make sure Barrett stayed alive at all costs. So you can see attack only finally starting to show that it can create some serious problems. Ever since we got to like the business end of the Shinra Building, things have definitely got a lot more interesting, and that's been good, because up until that point it had felt like it was a bit too easy and not quite as entertaining as I'd hoped. So can Barrett survive for long enough to get the job done? I mean, he is being picked on a little bit here, but his health is looking pretty healthy, and he's done already quite a significant amount of damage. So I was feeling like my chances were pretty good, but I just had to keep at it and see what we could do. Now, main artillery began, and that's not a lot of damage. Thankfully, again, back row plus sadness working well for Barrett, and he still has a lot of HP. But it was going to be the same problem, I think. Once Heli Gunner comes out, I was thinking, well, the other guys can't do damage once again, so we really do have to rely on Barrett to do everything in this battle. And again, because I don't know the game well enough, I couldn't really think ahead to like what future boss battles could this be a problem with, where like the team can't reach it, and you know, how much is that going to restrict things? Which characters will I be able to select for that particular boss battle? That kind of not knowing element and not having that same encyclopedic knowledge was definitely just one of the most interesting things to me, and it made me enjoy the run a lot more as well. So you can see, obviously a bit repetitive. It does kind of, there's nothing you can do here, you just kind of have to wait it out. You have to keep selecting attack with Aerith and Red, even though they can't attack. So it does take a little while here, but eventually it moves on to sensor charging. So we still haven't won yet. It's, like I say, it's got a lot of HP, and only one of my characters can attack it. So we still haven't taken it out yet. And well, this next attack, how much damage is it going to do? I was looking pretty healthy now, but 350, considering we still have one more battle to go, and Aerith is nearly dead, is suddenly not looking that great. So we really need to wrap this up now. But still haven't got it done. Wave artillery comes in. Thankfully, again, not very much damage. Barrett only took 37 there, and Aerith survived it, which was pretty crucial. But just refuses to die, and another one is coming soon. At this stage I was really starting to get worried, because Aerith was going to die from this next attack. So I really need to get this done. And still, it's alive. I felt like at this stage surely I'd done more than 16 attacks, but apparently not. And it looks like I am going to face another one of those. But Barrett comes in clutch in the final second to save Aerith's life, basically. and we move immediately to the next one. So it's going to be the same story here. Unfortunately, Red and Aerith can't reach. And Aerith dies, but you can see the sleep effect there. That's something that I didn't know was going to happen. And at this point, I was shitting bricks, thinking, yep, I'm going to die here, because Barrett's been put to sleep. How is he supposed to do enough damage to get the job done? Because obviously Nanaki is not going to be helping us very much here. So yeah, the situation was looking pretty dire at this point. This guy has 1000 HP, and the only thing I could rely on, and Barrett is missing sometimes as well. So absolutely terrible circumstances here. We've got the sleep stays effect, we've got one of our characters KO'd, and we have to somehow hang in there and basically connect enough times with Barrett to get the job done before we die. So let's see what's going to happen. It really did come down to the wire. Honestly, one of the tightest battles of most of the run, I would have to say. So this is probably one of the highlight battles. So put to sleep again, and we still have a lot of damage left to do, and he has to be hit in order to basically recover the sleep status. Poison as well. Since it's attack only, I am allowing characters to attack each other basically, if that's going to help, and so that's something I will do. It still stays within the attack only philosophy basically. That was my main goal, what I wanted to do. Because otherwise it was going to really come down to some hardcore RNG. It was going to require a lot of resets. And so I did attack Barrett here to get rid of the sleep status. And even then it remains very close. And then Nanaki took yet another hit and then died from poison damage. So Nanaki did absolutely everything that he could to keep the team alive. And now it was up to Barrett to bring it home and not miss the crucial final few hits needed to get the job done. Let's see if he can do it. This was so tight. Nope, not enough. So then it used this move, Firing Line. Instead of putting him to sleep, Firing Line came in. 42, he survives with 13 HP left, and it's still not enough. Sea Cannon comes in, and we die. So there we go. Second game over. Yeah. Tough battle, man. Tough battle. Even though I used Nanaki to wake up Barrett from sleep, it still wasn't enough, and we still died. So I tried to keep it as, like, you know, ambiguous as I could about whether I'd win or not. But yes, that was a tough battle. And as I said, things definitely ramped up a lot once we got to the Shinra Building. So now I had to kind of decide if I would tackle it the same way and hope for better RNG, or if I needed a different setup. Of course, Elemental plus Lightning, once again, that's basically our best shot at this stage. There's not too much else I can do here for Barrett in terms of the attack. I did equip some yellow materials that gave me a few extra stats like Dexterity +2. There's not really a penalty for using it, so why not? And here, even though I can't use some of these materials in battle, of course I need to level up materials too. And so sometimes I would still equip materials that I can't really use in battle anyway, just to get the AP points, even if they came with a slight penalty. This time I decided to basically use my tranquilizers on Barrett and on Red to give myself a better chance here. I felt like just using one wasn't going to be enough. I left myself one for Cloud, but I wanted to have two characters with Sadness this time. I moved Red to the back row as well, because you saw that Red couldn't reach. I wasn't aware of that in the first encounter. I thought maybe Red can still kind of leap over and reach. And so I did hang around a little longer just to get everybody up one more level. So Barrett was now at level 14, Red level 15, and Aerith level 13. And I picked up a few extra Phoenix Downs and stuff for my trouble as well. And so I figured with that, with a little bit of extra stats and a little bit of extra prep, I should hopefully be able to get the job done here. So I moved Red back up to the front row in order to win those random encounters, but I needed to remember to put him back to the back row, because obviously he can't influence the battle in any way other than taking hits. And so with that, I hoped it would be enough to beat them this time around, because I was pretty close last time. And I wanted to see if I could get it done by basically just being one level higher and being slightly better prepared. So here we go again. Take two. Let's see what happens this time. So if you remember, I was doing between about 100 and 106 damage to 100 gunner with Barret. Let's see how that's changed with one more level. Okay, so we're doing about 5 to 7 more damage, and while that could add up potentially, it could require one less hit. So 1,600 HP, if you're doing about 112, then it could potentially make the difference between needing 15 hits versus needing 16. So yeah, every little helps here. And so with this, again, I'm going to start to skip forward here because you've seen this battle already. I basically obviously did exactly what I did last time, but I am a little bit tankier and a little bit stronger than I was before. And so this is what things look like by the time I defeated 100 Gunner. Everybody's still alive and they have a decent amount of HP, but Barret has a little bit less HP than I would like. We'll just have to see if it's enough to hold on the second attempt. Here we go, Heli Gunner. Once again, a lot of it is going to come down to who gets hit with the sleep. If Barret doesn't get hit with sleep here, then it will make a massive difference. I would like to get through the battle without having to attack my own party. That's like a bending of the rules that I generally try to avoid as much as I can. And so we'll see how it played out in this particular battle. It's like I'm not going to wake up Nanaki here, obviously. Just keep playing and seeing how we do. The sea cannon we're fine against. Barret does have poison protection. And so 116 is good. As long as he keeps connecting here and making these hits, it's going to make all the difference. And again, he only needs 9 hits to defeat it, so hopefully that should be enough. So that one little level up has already made a decent amount of difference. So this was definitely looking way, way better than last time. And I was thankful because all I had to do was have maybe like 8 or 10 extra battles and get everybody one level higher. That was the primary reason I think I was able to win. Alongside moving Nanaki to the back row, of course. But again, this is where that sort of lack of knowledge comes in and where it's more fun to kind of learn on the fly, remember on the fly, and adapt accordingly. There's definitely some battles where I remember how certain things work, but there's definitely, like for this one, I definitely forgot that basically Barret was the only one that could do any damage physically. But you can see, I mean, there is a chance we potentially make it with everybody alive this time. So considering how badly the previous attempt went, I think it's going to be nice to be able to get it done while keeping everybody alive and not having to attack our own party as well, only doing enemy attacks. Auto battle style. Now, flying drill hitting Barret there was not very nice, but he's still got a decent chunk of HP here. But I would dread to think what would happen if we didn't have Sadness. I do wonder how the run would change without Sadness. Honestly, it might not be enough here and I just have to level up even more. So you kind of just replace the Sadness states effect with maybe being like 3 to 5 levels higher potentially. But you can see it's got a big arsenal of moves here and it's really trying to use everything here. But Barret really needs to connect here and get the job done. And he does. So there we go. Second time round. We managed to get the job done. And we took out Heli Gunner as well. So now, in order to properly try to escape Midgar, it was up to Cloud to see if he could defeat Rufus one-on-one. So, this is where I'm going to end this first episode. It's been a pretty long one already, but I want to set things off with a nice long episode so you can get the vibe here. The next episode isn't going to be as long as this one, but it's going to continue to be condensed. A lot of stuff here I talked about for the first time, you saw for the first time, and so in general we'll kind of skip through things at a bit more of a rapid pace than the next one. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed this first episode and generally seeing how this challenge is working in Final Fantasy VII. Thank you all so much for the support. Much like I did with the Final Fantasy X series, I will be making early access available on Patreon. As always, this early access just literally means that you get to watch it before it goes live on YouTube, and not that you can't watch it unless you pay for it, of course, which is something I've never done at all in my YouTube career, and it will continue that way. but it supports the channel absolutely massively. So as always, anybody that is willing to contribute to the channel in that way and gain some perks as a result, I would kindly ask that you give the Patreon a look and support it if you are so inclined. So I'll wrap things up here, and in the next part we will have the showdown between Cloud and Rufus, the one-on-one, and we'll see if we can make it out of Midgar and how things work once we truly enter the open world and gain a bit more freedom in how we proceed. So thank you all so much for watching. I will see you soon. Take care.